Hi, this is Amber from the A-Team. In case you weren't able to come to our Google Forms session, we have an updated video that we're posting for Google Forms. There have been a lot of changes since our last session. So instead of editing the previous video, we've decided to upload an entirely new video. So we're going to be focusing on the basics of using Google Forms. And one of the things that we would like to share with you first is the handout that kind of goes through the steps of what we'll be showing. So in case you'd like to review or you'd like a document to look at with some of the notes, we've put a short URL here. It's goo.gl/K2 capital A Q capital D Z. And once you go to this site, you will see the handout on using Google Forms for formative assessment, and this document takes you through how to make your form, different settings of the form, and the different things that we're going to cover in this video. So I wanted just to show you that to you so that in case you want to follow along or in case that's something helpful for you, that you'll be able to use that to guide you as you go. But what we're going to do is we're going to start in Drive. Okay, we do suggest that when you are making a form, it's sometimes helpful to go from Drive so that if you're going to start making a lot of forms, that you can actually create a folder in your Google Drive specifically for your forms. Even though it's quite easy to search for a form specifically or use the advanced search function at the top to search for forms, I still like to make a folder and try to keep my Drive organized. So if you're going to be making different forms for assessments per period, you could make a Google Forms period folder, Google Forms period 1, Google Forms period 2, or you can make just a generic folder called Google Forms or Forms for Science Assessments. However you choose to do it, it's really a good idea to kind of organize your forms into folders. So the first thing that I'm going to do is go ahead and create a form. So you can do this two ways. You can go up to the New button and go to More and choose Google Forms, or you can also right-click and do More and choose Google Forms. And what that's going to do is open up a blank form. I will pause for just a minute and go back to Drive to show you that you could go up to your waffle and choose to go to Forms this way, and I'll go ahead and click there so you can see the difference. This does provide you with the forms that you have access to. You can categorize it by ones that you have access to that are owned by anyone, owned by you, or not owned by you. This is one way to go to forms, and there are some templates at the top that you could choose to use as well. However, I simply like going into the folder that I want it to be in, and then I click New Form. So we've got our form here, and it does come up in this traditional purple view from the very beginning. But when you first come to your form, the very first thing you're going to want to do is go ahead and give it a title, because there's nothing worse than finding like 10 forms called untitled in your folder and you don't know which one is which. So we're going to call this Classroom Assessment. You can call it whatever you want, but something that will be indicative to you of the purpose of this form. And you'll notice that it also changes the title here on my form. So now that I have a title there is a place that you can add a description if you would like. This is any information that may be helpful for students to complete the form. Like, this assessment is on chapter 4, or, let's evaluate your understanding and let's think about questions you still may have, that kind of thing. So you can put a form description, but that's not mandatory. I would like to express that at this point, I find it super important to go to Settings right away. So let's talk about these settings. There are 3 tabs in Settings: General, Presentation, and Quizzes. So let's go through each one. It's really important that as you're creating a form, you know the purpose and how you want to use it. So let's go through Settings before we even start adding questions. So the first option is whether or not you would like for Google to collect the email addresses of people as they are filling out your form. This is super helpful if you're using this for students within your domain or for staff members in your domain so that you can collect those email addresses from them. That requires them to be logged in to take the assessment. Also, you have the ability to do receipts. You can send a receipt only if the respondent requests it, and it allows, at the very end of the form, there'll be a little button that they can toggle on to turn on that they want a receipt, or you can force it to always send it. So let's talk about receipts. What receipts are is they receive a copy of their responses. So I caution you with this because you really need to think if you are going to create a form that automatically grades and sends it directly to the students, they're going to have copies of the questions and answers. We hope to think that they won't do this, but keep in mind that they may be able to share from first period with the second period students. So you might want to use this with caution, or there's another setting that we'll look at so that you could allow them to receive those responses, which are really great tools for review, but only when you release them, and you can release them all at the same time. So we'll look at two different ways to do that, but I did want to caution you about doing response receipts. So here in require users to sign in, because I've collected their email addresses, I am going to restrict it to only people in our domain. This is one I would make sure and uncheck if I'm using this with parents. If I wanted to do a parent anonymous survey, I don't want them to have to log in because obviously parents are not going to have the email addresses in our domain. And again, you have to kind of think about how you're going to do the form, because if you'll notice that was already checked, so that's a default. So I have to know to come into settings to turn that off if I'm using it as an anonymous survey. The other thing that's underneath that is limiting responses. I can choose to only limit to one response, which means each student or each person who comes to this form can only fill it out once. It does require them to be signed into Google in order for this to work, but since I'm already collecting their email addresses and I've restricted it to people in our domain, that's okay. What will happen is if they get an email with the link to this form and they've already filled it out, if they click on it again and attempt to fill it out again, it will say you have already submitted this form. But I'm going to limit mine to one response. Down here, we can decide if you want to allow them to edit their responses after they submit. In this case, I'm making an assessment, so I don't want to do that. And you can also decide if you want them to see a summary chart and responses, and this will make more sense in at the end when I show you what it looks like on the flip side after you've made the form. But basically, this would allow the students to see how well the people did that have already taken it, and it will allow them to see the responses of others. In this particular case, I don't want to turn that on because I'm going to use mine as an assessment, and if I want to show them the summary charts later, I can do that from the teacher's perspective later. So I'm going to leave that one off. So let's go to the presentation tab. So the first option under presentation is showing a progress bar. If you're going to have a long form that has several pages of questions, it's really helpful to show the end user how much progress they've made in taking, so they kind of know how much longer the assessment is. Mine's not going to be super long, so I'm not going to use that. The next one is one that I absolutely love. It's the shuffle question order option. What this does is I can put my questions in a particular order on my assessment, but if I have this checked, the questions will shuffle and be in a different order for each person who takes the assessment. I will point out a slight caveat to that when we get ready to add questions, but this is an excellent option so that you can make sure that two people sitting next to each other are going to be served their forms in different orders. Now, on the previous tab, I selected to limit to one response. So if I did not have this checked, one of the other options that I have is show a link to submit another response. Now, we use this option if we're using a Google form as an attendance sheet, because it allows us to, as soon as someone signs in, they can submit another response, and the next person right behind them can sign in. So it just, again, it depends on how you're going to use it. But because I'm limiting this as a student assessment, I'm going to select general to allow only one submission of the form, so that takes this option away. The confirmation is what shows up after they've hit submit. I like to customize this, so since this is assessment, I'm going to say great work, I'll send your scores later, because in this particular instant, I'm going to grade theirs later. So sometimes it's fun to kind of put a customized message here. So now let's go to the quizzes tab. This is the tab that's super new, and it is fantastic. What this allows me to do is make a quiz where I can actually assign point values and do some auto grading. In the past, teachers have had to use Flubaroo and some other tools to get some kind of automation in this grading piece, but now Google has actually built this into Google Forms. So I'm going to actually turn this on. Again, you're only going to turn this on if you want to assign point values and you want to do some auto grading. I'm going to show you how to do that, so I'm going to turn this on. So there are several quiz options. As far as releasing the grade, you can decide to release the grade immediately, and that means if you have only multiple choice questions or questions that can be marked right or wrong, that they can receive their score immediately. That may be good for you, but if you have any that are open-ended or short answer, or there's some that you actually can't put a correct answer on and you have to manually grade, in that case, if you release the grade immediately and 5 of the questions were multiple choice and 5 of the questions were open-ended, then they're going to get a 50 even if they got all the multiple questions correct, because you haven't had a chance to grade the others. So I really don't like doing immediately unless I only have multiple choice questions. So I'm going to actually change mine to later, after manual review, and what that means is it will collect all my responses, and then I'll be able to mark those items that are open-ended or can't be auto-graded. So now the next thing I can decide is what I want the person who's responding to be able to see. So do I want them to see any missed questions? Do I want them to be able to see if their answer was correct right away? Do I want them to be able to see the point values? So if I send them a summary later, they're going to be able to see this. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this off for now, but this is certainly something that you could do. Then this bottom one is super important, because if you ask any questions, you'll see that we can ask a question that has multiple answers that are correct. If let's say you had a question that had 5 choices and 3 of them were correct, if you allow them to see the point values and you've given that question a 3-point value because there are 3 correct answers, then the students will be able to deduce how many they have to select. So I like turning this off for me if I'm using those questions that are associated with multiple answers per question. But you could turn it on if you want, if you're asking some open-ended questions and you want them to know this question is worth 5 points, but this question is only worth 1. So that's entirely up to you. I'm going to turn that off, however. But once you've gone through the general, the presentation, and the quizzes tabs, and you've made all these decisions about your form, then you can click Save on the bottom. And now we can actually start building the form. So just to review, the first thing we did is we gave it a title and a description if we wanted. The second important step is to go ahead and go to Settings first, because as you're building your assessment, there's some choices that you can make that are based on those things that you chose in Settings. So now let's start looking at this interface and looking at the menu, and then we'll start adding some questions. So you'll see we have our title and our description here, and we also have a little statement saying it's collecting the email addresses because that was one of the options that I turned on in settings. To the right of the question panel, you'll see this small menu. The plus sign is to add a new question. The T is to add a title and description because maybe you want to break up your form into different sections and you just want to add some text, not ask a question, but just put some information in. That's what that's for. You also have the option to add an image. You also have the option to add a video and to add a section. I want to go back and talk about these three here for just a moment. Do you remember in settings I had the option to shuffle my questions? Well, when you shuffle questions, it actually also shuffles your descriptions, the images if you've added them from here, and videos if you've added them from here. So if I'm going to use shuffling as a way to kind of keep kids from copying off of each other sort of thing, I won't want to use these items because that means if I put these in a certain order, for example, if I add a video and say watch this video and then underneath it I ask some questions, once I turn question shuffling on, my video is going to be in a different place than my questions. So you really need to do some thinking about if shuffling is right for you if you're going to be using these options. Sections is basically a page break. You know your students, if they can only handle 5 questions on a page and you don't want them to have to scroll very long on the page, you may want to put a couple questions, add a section, do a couple questions, add another section, and that forces them to go from page to page to page to answer the questions. In this case, we're not going to use any sections, but I want to go ahead and show you the anatomy of some of the questions. So let's start with a question. And it's important when you enter questions to understand the options that are available to you. So we're going to look at this question pane, and I'm going to break it kind of down so that you can see what each of the things are. So in this untitled question section, which is the thing that will be in all your new questions, this is actually where you enter the question today. For example, list 3 things that you learned today. So I'm going to actually change using this drop down, and I'm going to go ahead and change this to short answer because I want to go ahead and start showing you an example of a question. But this is where you'll put your question. You also have the drop down, which I just showed you. If there are any options, for example, if this were a multiple choice, your options kind of go here. Then we have the copy option if you wanted to duplicate a question and use it again and just maybe tweak a few things. That does save you some time. The trash can option deletes that particular question. The required toggle turns a question on so that in order to submit, they have to actually answer that question before they submit. So you'll want to decide if you want to require your questions. Then you have what we call the corn dog menu. And in the corn dog menu, this varies per question, but you'll notice that we have the option to put in a description. We have the option to go to a section based on an answer, and that's really an advanced forms feature that we're not going to cover today, but that option is there, and that's where you find that. And the next one is shuffle option order. So if I were doing multiple choice, I can actually shuffle my options within this question. This is different than shuffle the question. This is shuffle the option. So that means these options under here would be shuffled. Then you have the answer key, which we'll talk about in just a moment, and that's the magic of being able to use the new quizzes feature. You also have the 6 dots that will be at the top that allow you to drag this question. We've only got one here, but what this allows you to do is drag the questions around. This is only helpful if you have shuffling turned off in terms of shuffling questions. If you have shuffle questions on, you really won't need to worry about dragging these around. But if you needed these in a logical order, you would turn shuffle questions off and you would use this to drag them in the correct order. Then you have the ability to add images. So This image is actually part of the question. This is a great place if you needed to put a map or a graph or a chart or some sort of image that you're going to ask a question about. This is the way that I would use it and still be able to turn my shuffle options on, because this image will definitely stay with this question. And you'll notice when I go down to my options, I also have the ability to put in images for my options as well. But let's get started with making a question. I'm going to go ahead back to the short answer question. And this is going to be a question that requires a very short answer, 1 or 2 words, or 1 word, just a short little answer. So I'm going to say, who is your favorite character? That's going to be my question, and they'll be able to add an answer here. So now I'm going to decide, do I want to require this question or not? So I'm going to turn this question on and say, yes, I'm going to require this. They have to answer this in order to take the test. Then the next thing I have to do is go to the answer key. Now, I can't add the specific answer for a short answer question and have it graded, but what I can do is give points to this question. Maybe this is a 2-point question. So if they do get it correct after I grade it myself manually, then that's how many points they'll get. I also have the ability to add answer feedback. So if once they've answered, I can give them some feedback. So I'm going to skip this because I'm going to show you another place that you can do that as well. So on this particular question, I'm not going to put in answer feedback. So I'm going to go back to edit question. You'll notice that this sort of changed a little bit. When I click answer key, I get this purple banner at the top that's telling me that I'm in the mode for putting in correct answers, or the answer key and points. And I can go back to edit question and get back in my edit view. So now let's enter another question. I'm going to click add question, and this time I'm going to use my drop down and choose paragraph because I want to ask a longer question. So this time I'm going to say, why did you like this character? Now, in this particular circumstance, shuffling the questions would not be the best option here because I really would want to keep these together. So this is another example of how you have to constantly be thinking about settings as you are creating your assessment. So this is where they're going to put in their long text. I decide if I want to require it or not, and then I need to go to the answer key and give this some points. Well, since this is an open-ended question, I'm going to say this one is going to be a 5-point question. And again, I can add some feedback if I'd like. So I can go back to that menu. So you see what starts happening is I start getting my point values down at the bottom. So now I'm going to add another question, and this time we're going to go ahead and do multiple choice, which as you've noticed, if you've been adding questions to yours as you've been going along with me, the default is multiple choice because that typically is the kind of question that people use on forms a lot. So that's why that one comes up as the default. So for here, I'm going to say which word is correct. And I'm going to give the example, I blank pizza. Okay, and maybe my option 1 is going to be like, and I want an option 2, so I have to hit enter to get my second option, and then I'm going to put in likes, and then maybe I'm going to put likely for my last one. So you'll notice I've got these options here. Now in this particular circumstance, I'm going to want to go to the corn dog menu and shuffle my option order so that each person gets different answers in a different order. So it's going to shuffle like, likes, and likely in different orders depending on who's taking the assessment. So now I'm going to go to the answer key, and this time I not only get the option to give it points, so maybe this is a 2-point question, but I also get to choose the correct answer by simply clicking on the correct answer, and you'll notice it gets the green check mark, which tells me, oh, that one's correct. So if they choose that one, I'm going to automatically assign them 2 points, and if they miss it, they're going to lose 2 points. Again, I can add some answer feedback if I'd like, and you'll notice in this option, I get to add feedback if they put the incorrect answer and feedback if they give the correct answer. Well, in this case, I'm going to go to this incorrect answer, and I'm going to think, you know, if they miss that, they may need some extra support. So if anyone puts an incorrect answer to this, I might say review the grammar document we covered in class. And maybe I have a link to that document. So I can do a link to this particular grammar document. And this is not really a grammar document, but I'm going to say google.com just so you can see how this works. And I'm going to call this the grammar resource. So you see I could put a website here, which could be a link to a Google Doc. It could be a PDF link. Whatever the resource is, I give it a name and I can click add. And what that means is if this person incorrectly answers this question, they're going to get review this and here's this resource. So this is an awesome way to give some extra feedback for students after they've received their support from this. So that was doing a multiple choice. So now let's go to a new question, and we're going to do the checkboxes question. And this is the one that I was talking about as the reason that I don't like showing the point values, because I do my point values for questions that have multiple answers by giving a point for each of the answers that's possibly correct. So here I'll show you what I mean. So let's do choose the nouns. Okay, and I'm going to put in some of my answers. So dog, cat, let's do run, even though I know run can also be a noun. Just work with me here. We're going to say this is a low-level grammar activity. And table can be a verb and a noun. So walk, same thing, but work with me here. So these are going to be the things they can choose multiple answers for. So I'm going to go to my answer key. And I'm going to say, okay, dog, cat, and table are going to be the ones that I want them to choose, because in this first grade activity, they're thinking of run as a verb and walk as a verb. So we're going to use these three. So I like assigning my point values to match this. So if my students could see the point values, then they know, oh, 3, I have to answer 3 because, you know, so you get how that can give it a clue. Again, I can also add answer feedback for incorrect and correct answers the same way I did before. So now let's go back to edit question. So now you see that one has 3 points, and you can see now from this view which ones are going to be correct. So let's add another question. We're going to do a drop-down question now, and this drop-down question, we're going to use it as a true or false. I will tell you, if you're going to do a lot of multiple choice questions, that it's actually a really good idea to use the drop down, because it takes up less space on the screen in a drop down. So if you're going to be doing a lot of multiple choice questions like this one, and there's going to be tons of choices and your form gets really long, the drop down kind of gives you more screen real estate. So I'm going to say the Nile River is located in India. That's going to be my question here. I'm going to go to the answer key. I'm going to give this a point and say, no, the Nile River is not located in India. So I've given it my point. I've chosen the correct answer. I always, as I'm going, because there's so many steps, I'll click back on each question and make sure that there are points assigned, because sometimes I will forget to do the points. There's our point there. And I need to make sure and go back and say, okay, did I give everybody a point? Because it's really bad when I go through and I've given 0 points and they got them all right and they got nothing. Okay, so let's go from drop down to the newest question type, which I love. It's the file upload question. Now, when you choose this option, it is going to give you a warning, and it's going to say that if you're the owner of this form, what they're uploading is going to go into your Google Drive. So you want to only send it to people that you trust, so that they're not uploading bad things into your drive, but it will go into the owner's drive. So I'm going to say, yes, I know, I will take that risk, and I'm going to continue. And then I'm going to ask my question. So maybe I'm going to say, share the image you found of your favorite holiday. Maybe I had them go and take photographs and I wanted them to share that picture with me as a question. Or maybe this is go in Google Drawings and make a map and highlight certain areas that show something special and then upload your file here. So there's all sorts of ways you can use it. Now, as you've put your question here, your directions for the file upload, you can give them a maximum number of files, either 1, 5, or 10. You can also pick the file size. Well, since this is going to be an image, I think 10 megs is fine, but you'll notice that's up to 10 gigs. I would use that with serious caution because that's really large. And you can also go into file types. Since I've set an image, I can go in file types and say, I don't want to allow every file type. I want them to either send me an image or a drawing because those are the only images I want. So that means if they go and try to upload a video, it's not going to work. So now I'm going to go to my answer key for the sole purpose of giving feedback if I want to and giving the point values because this one, it does not have a way to auto grade. So now let's go to add linear scale. So the next question is linear scale, and that's like your Likert scale. You can choose to go from 1 to 10 on your scale, or from 0 if you'd prefer to start at 0. So I'm going to say mine's going to be 1 to 7. And so for my 1 label, maybe I want to put not satisfied at all and extremely satisfied. And my question is going to be, how satisfied are you with your Chromebook? And they're going to answer on a scale of 1 to 7, whether they are not satisfied at all or extremely satisfied. Again, I can go into my answer key and give it points if I want to and feedback. So before we go on to other questions, I do want to stop here and show you what this is going to look like by taking you up to the top and showing you the preview eye. Anytime you're working on your form, if you click on the preview eye, a new tab will open and you'll get to see what your form is going to look like. Now remember, I had mine shuffled, which is another reason previewing it is a very good idea. So my first question is not who's your favorite character. It shuffled mine even in my preview. But I wanted you to see how this Likert scale looks. It looks very different in this view between not satisfied and extremely satisfied than it does in this view. So I kind of wanted you to see, you may want to look at it in preview mode just so you sort of get an idea of what it will look like to the end user. So I'm going to go ahead and close that preview. So now I'm going to add a new question. And this is the multiple choice grid question. And this is the one that's going to be super important for you to look at in preview mode to make sure that you've done it right. So I'm actually going to change this to multiple choice grid. And what I like doing is I like doing my columns first. So in my columns, I'm going to put never, rarely, sometimes, and always. Okay, and then over here I can actually put the things that I'm talking about. So I'm going to say book, newspaper, blog, and journal. Oops. And my question is going to be, how often do you read these types of materials? So if I come here and I go to preview, let's see what this is going to look like. How often do you read these types of materials? You'll see that they can answer each thing across. So this gives kind of a grid of them to answer questions. And this is great if you wanted to sort of combine a Likert scale with a list of items. So back to here, there is a toggle at the bottom now, but this one doesn't just require you to answer the question. This one is require at least one response per row. So this is really important if you're wanting to require each row to have an answer. And again, that is using your multiple choice grid. And for each of these questions, remember there's also the little corn dog menu that has different items depending on your question. One here that's specific to this type of question is to limit one response per column. So this would be specifically helpful if maybe I'd put instead of never, rarely, sometimes, always, maybe I said first choice, second choice, third choice, fourth choice, like a rubric sort of thing. And I said, okay, is book your first choice, second choice, third choice, or fourth choice? So you can use it that way as well if you wanted to not to use it to say one response per column. So that's a certain thing that's specific to that type of question. The last two questions are very simple. It's, do you want someone to enter a date or a time? So those are there if you would like to use those as well. And each of those question types comes with, and I'm going to actually delete that one, each of those question types comes with their own options. You'll notice, however, that on this multiple choice grid, and I forgot to mention this earlier, I apologize, does not have an answer key, nor does it have a point option. This question at this time does not have that, but keep watching because that may come very soon. So now that we've gone through this and we've given all these points and we're ready, we've finished, we've got all our answer keys in there, we've put feedback in where we wanted to put feedback. Let's look for just a moment at these other options that are here on the side. So if I wanted to put text in, I could click text, and this is just another, maybe this is just a reminder. I wanted to, this assessment is on chapter 4, whatever it is. It's not a question at all. So if I go to preview right now, don't forget, this is a, but you see how it kind of puts it on as a banner and then your information kind of goes on the side. But again, that does get shuffled. So if I wanted to put an image in, for example, maybe I wanted to put a map. So maybe I have this map that I want to upload to my form. I can say this is a map of New Orleans and give it a name. I've got my 3-dot menu here where I can align it in certain ways, change it or remove it. And I can give it some hover text, which will be helpful for anybody who has vision issues. So I'm going to go ahead and put some hover text in there as well. And then when I go to my preview, there's my image. Okay. And it's basically just a picture. So this might be a good option if you're putting in a graph or a chart or an image that's going to have some questions associated with it. The last one is add a video, and this is an awesome option if you want to put a YouTube video and ask some questions about it. So let's say I have this YouTube video I want them to watch. I put the URL to the video there, search for it, choose it, and I can give it a title. Watch this video and answer the following questions. I can also go to the corn dog menu by the video and do the same things I could before with the alignment if I wanted to center it on the page. So then I can go to the preview and notice how my video is now above the map of New Orleans because it's getting shuffled. So in this particular case, if I wanted to put this video and then some questions after it, I would want to turn off question shuffling so it wouldn't shuffle my video around in my questions. So that's adding a video. Again, the section breaks is a way to open it up to a next page if you wanted to do that. But I'm going to delete that section because we're not going to really cover sections in here. I do want to show you, though, that now we have all these different questions. If I had shuffling turned off, I can drag and drop these questions in different orders. If there was a specific order, I need to have it in with shuffling off. So now let's talk about getting your form ready to use. You can customize the way your form looks. At the very top, there's a painter's palette. If you click on the painter's palette, you have various colors that you can choose from. So if you wanted to change the look of your form, it automatically kind of changes the font color based on the color that you pick. But you also have the option to click on the bottom right and choose an image. There are themes that are already created by Google, some of which actually have movement in them. For example, if I go to sports, I actually have this person throwing a basketball. So if I put this on my form, it actually puts a moving picture at the top, which is kind of cool. But you do have the options to use some of those themes there. You can upload your own, but because you'll see this picture is very narrow in height, but it's wide, you'll want to make sure that you know how to deal with images, because as you resize this, it changes, and so it needs to be super high quality, and it also needs to be an image that's more of a panoramic type feel. So again, that's by the painter's palette. We've already talked about using the eye to preview your form. So I'll go ahead and preview it again now that we have the top here, and you'll see that it's kind of placed my information into my form with my new theme. Also, we have the send button that's at the top. So when you are finished with your form, you can click on the send button. And what this will do is allow you several different ways to share your form. Now, I've already set mine to collect usernames, and they will be warned that our username is being collected. Super helpful with students, so that automatically they have to be logged in so you know who does what. But I can choose to email this form to someone. And if I do choose to email someone, I can also use a group. So if I have a list that I've made into my contacts that have multiple contacts, I can choose that, and it will put everyone's name there. Or I can just simply start typing a person's name and their email address will come up. So that's one way that we'll send the form. Also, I have the ability to just get a link. This might be a link that I put on my website or a link that I send out in an email. I can also choose to shorten that URL if I'd like, so that they can click on it and go to the form. The last option is some embed code for embedding HTML. If you wanted to embed that in a website, there is the way to do that as well. The last options are I could share through Google+, share it through Facebook, or share it through Twitter. So there are lots of different ways that you can send your form out. Now, if you needed someone to help you be able to edit the form as well as view all the responses within the form, you can add something called a collaborator. You can do that several ways. This is the way that there's in the send form option. You can add collaborators here. You can also go to the corn dog menu at the top and choose add collaborators, and you'll see that if you add someone, for example, if I add Angie here, the only option I have is to give her editing rights, because a collaborator is someone who can help you edit your questions. That means they can delete questions, add questions, and view the responses. So those are collaborators. Okay, so let's talk about responses. We haven't pointed out yet that there's a questions tab and a responses tab on each form in the new forms. The questions are where you're going to see your questions on your form, and the responses are going to be where you see anyone who's responded. And you'll see right now it's waiting for responses. I don't have any. There are none. I also do want to point out that you have your toggle button where you can actually turn off your responses. So if you're closing a form and saying it's over, you can't add your answers now, that's where you would do that. But to show you this, I'm going to actually open up a form that we've already done that has some responses in it, so that you can see here are the questions and here's the responses tab, and I want you to be able to see this summary. Now earlier we turned off an option to allow students to see a summary and individual responses or text responses. This is actually sort of what they would get, so they could see, you know, what was the average, the median, and the range of your form in general. Then you can, as the owner of the form or any collaborators can also see the scores. So you'll see here, we've got someone who made a 0 here, but you'll also notice that there are a couple where the scores haven't been released. So we'll look at that as well. Another piece that I love is there's always a frequently missed question at the top. And so 2 out of 5 people missed this question. So that's considered a frequently missed question. So that might help me with some targeted review. But you're going to get graphs, or if it's a text response, you'll see individual text. But you'll also see that everybody who uploaded something, their responses are going to be here, and it'll also provide me a link to that folder. But I just wanted you to see that there are some really great quick information you can get from this Summaries tab. But there's also an Individual tab. So I'm going to click on the Individual tab and show you that from this point I can toggle through the responses. But I can also use this drop down and choose a particular person really quickly. For example, if these were my students and I quickly wanted to see how Johnny did on his, I could just find his name, click on it, and it would pull it up. So this is one that has not been graded, and you'll know that because it says score has not been released. That's because I turned off to automatically release the score, and I did that because I have questions like this that can't really be marked right or wrong by my Google form. They're not automatically graded. So at this point, I can actually go through and I see anything that is not marked and does not have points. I've got to come and grade these, but any that did have correct and incorrect answers, those are automatically graded. So I can see some of these have already been checked for me. So if they're not checked, I'm going to go in now. If this is correct, I can give them their point, and I can also choose to add individual feedback. Now remember, right now I'm on Jane Doe's, so this feedback goes specifically to this person. So I can give her feedback, and I can also provide a link to something that might be helpful for her if she needs to review that. So I'll put that there. Explain the author's purpose. Let's say this was really not that great of a response, so I'm going to put just 1 point there, or give her no points. Let's give her no points because that was only. So this is really not, next time give a more thorough response, whatever it is you want your responses to be. But these are individual feedback. This is only going to go to this one particular student. I could even add individual feedback on ones that are correct. Great job, proud of you, whatever. This is that automatic feedback that I set in the previous view for feedback. So this feedback is going to automatically go to this student, but I can still add individual feedback if I'd like to as well. But these have already been graded. So this student got 2 of the 3 correct. So I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, you got 2 out of those 3. This one's graded. I can look at their erosion, see, well, this is actually a floor plan. I can open it, look at it, and decide what that score is going to be there. Add some feedback. I think you attached the wrong file, whatever. Go ahead and give these points. Let's say that, this one is one of those, again, if you use this grid, you can't add point values yet, but that's probably coming. This is correct. It was November 8th, and our lunch bell does not ring at 1:08, so I'm going to give this a 0. This is incorrect. And these are just images that were in the file, and this one was automatically graded. So once I have put in edits to this, notice this says edits are pending. I can click save. And so it has saved my feedback and the scores that I just put in. When I'm ready, I can release this score to this student. What happens when I click release score, it will also give me the option to go ahead and choose everybody if I want to release the scores. I can put a message up here, please open this and review, and then I can say send emails and release. What happens is that person is going to get an email that gives them their score. So here's an example of a mailbox that says your score was released. and it was on this assessment called Exit Ticket. So I open that, and as the students, I can see exactly what my score is. And if I want to see more, I click on View, and it takes me to the student view, and I can see all my individual feedback that was provided for me with any links to resources that I may want to, for example, look at Chapter 2, help you review. So I missed the oviparous question. So this particular resource is going to bring me to oviparous animals description so that I can study some more. And then I can see exactly what I missed and exactly which ones I got correct. So if I did miss it, it's going to show me which ones are correct and which ones are incorrect. So this is an example of what the student sees. And again, as the teacher, you have the ability to go in and look at these individual responses. You will be able to see when a score was released, and if you needed to re-edit it, you can come and re-edit it again. For example, remember down here, I said maybe they attached the wrong thing. Well, maybe they sent me an email. I'm so sorry I hit the wrong one. Maybe now I want to go ahead and say, okay, I'm going to give you the point for that. So you see you can go back and edit it. And then it says updates were made after you released it. So you can re-release the score to the student. The student is going to get a new email with a new score, and you can see how it immediately changed it. So these tools within Google Forms are super powerful and super helpful as you're going through and learning how to use Google Forms. There are lots of other advanced features to forms, but we just wanted to get you started and hope that you will make a form and practice with it. We do suggest that you use that preview button for sure, but you also may want to send your friend, your coworker, your peer that form and let them fill it out as a test just to kind of see how it works. The last thing that I wanted to kind of show you is if you're used to the traditional spreadsheet method with collecting information, you can go to the spreadsheet responses just like you used to have before, which will open up in a traditional spreadsheet, and it will give you all the information if you needed quickly to get that, or if you needed to upload it somewhere, you can get to your spreadsheet. There's also the ability to get email notifications for new responses. This may be helpful if maybe you put a form out that's asking parents for their email addresses, or for their favorite date to come for a parent meeting. You may want to get an email notification that someone's filled out the form. I wouldn't suggest this for all forms by any means, but there may be a certain time that you need to get an email notification, and you will get an update that someone has put in a response to the form. Also, you have the option to delete all responses if you wanted to empty this form out, and maybe it's not important for you to keep them. But you can also, if you wanted to make a copy of a form, you can also go to a form, make a copy of that form, and when you make a copy of the form, you break all the content that has been filled out, so it's going to have no responses. So for me, instead of clearing out the responses, I like to make a copy of that, but this may be helpful if it's something that you don't need to keep that historical data for. So we hope this has been helpful for you. I hope you have fun making some formative assessment, summative assessment tool forms with this new tool, and enjoy using Google Forms. Thank you.